The CNBC app. Global market news in one place. Customizable sections and personalized alerts. Stocks tracking, interactive charts and market insights all in your hands. Stay connected. Stay informed. Download the CNBC app today.
A very good morning and happy Monday to you. Welcome to Squawk Box Europe. I'm Juliana Tatelbaum with Steve Sedgwick, and these are your headlines this morning. Futures point to a stock market rebound across Europe and the U.S. as President Trump says it will all be fine after triggering a Friday sell-off with his 100% tariff threat against China.
Israel's military says the first hostages have been released by Hamas under the Gaza ceasefire agreement as President Trump flies into the region. Iraq's prime minister tells CNBC he hopes today marks the start of lasting peace.
The United States initiative is important, and we hope this agreement will be a sustainable one and the beginning of a radical solution to this problem, one that will certainly guarantee the rights of the Palestinian people.
And Sebastian Lecornu unveils his new government 2 days after being reappointed as French Prime Minister and prepares to present a budget proposal today.
This is also a moment of truth. Are we capable of showing the French people that we can move forward? Yesterday, I heard statements from a political leader leaving the Élysée that seemed eager to move forward with a lot of determination.
Well, what a day Friday turned out to be.
Extraordinary.
Good morning.
Record highs virtually, a couple of points away. Then the sell-off on the post, on the Truth Social post.
Unbelievable how fortunes turn for the market. It feels like market participants kind of forgot about U.S.-China relations for a little while because relations seemed to be improving. The waters were calm, and then all of a sudden, a major escalation. We had an inkling this was coming through. We talked about China tightening those restrictions around rare earth exports and potentially that being an antagonistic move. But markets were pretty complacent about it until they weren't. And the Dow actually had its worst day in about 6 months on Friday.
Yeah.
Tech stocks got hammered.
Look, it won't come as a surprise to viewers that I don't have a view whether the market is going up or down from here. That isn't our role necessarily. Our role is to just give all the factors so that our viewers can make their own decisions as well. And one thing that I think seems very clear is that valuations and complacency and blinkered trading patterns where everyone is very concentrated on certain issues basically have led to the market having less durability during policy wobbles, when something goes wrong. Maybe it'd be an erroneous employment figure number, if ever we get employment figures ever again. Maybe it is about the Trans-Pacific relationship. Maybe it's about the hyperscaler profitability given the spending on AI. Whatever it may well be, the market has left itself vulnerable to relatively small pieces of information. And that's what we saw. I mean, this extraordinary sell-off led by the NASDAQ. And I hasten to add, this was led by US technology stocks. We've been led on the way up by them, and we've been led down by them on Friday as well. I think it just shows how vulnerable we are to shocks. I'm not saying, as I say, we're going up or down. That's not what I'm paid to do. But it just seems to me that the market is a little bit more hair-triggered, a little bit more nervous, and hasn't been taking out its downside protection in a meaningful way.
Well, it's already fascinating, though, that we are looking at a rebound in futures, just a matter of days after the major sell-off that we were just describing. Right now, we're looking at gains across the European market. On Friday, the Stoxx 600 fell about 1.25%, but that market sell-off came before we saw a major escalation in the selling stateside. So the losses in Europe paled compared to what we saw in the U.S. on Friday. As for Asian markets, overnight, they had their first chance to react to the sell-off on Wall Street on Friday, and you're looking at the Hang Seng off 2.25%. We were off even more than that at one stage. The tech sector within the Hong Kong market getting hit hardest. Over in South Korea, the cost be down about 1%, and we're also seeing a modest pullback in China, mainland China, with the Shanghai Composite down about 0.6%, but fairly contained, I would obviously say, compared to the selling that we saw stateside on Friday. Now, the turnaround comes as President Trump sounded a more positive tone on China this weekend, using his Truth Social account to tell people not to worry and that, quote, it will all be fine. Trump riled markets on Friday with the threat of an additional 100% tariff on Chinese imports following China's new export controls on rare earths. Beijing defended its new measures, calling them legitimate under international law. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer says Beijing deferred a phone call from Washington following China's extension of its rare earth export controls. Greer told Fox News that the administration was not notified of the new Chinese measures and that Beijing's, quote, power grab will not be tolerated. As for China, it said that it is, quote, not afraid of a trade war with the U.S. and accused Washington of double standards. Let's get out to Elaine, who has more on relations between the U.S. and China, where things stand now. Elaine, my question to you is, clearly President Trump has tried to walk back some of the threats that were announced on Friday and downplay the escalation in tensions between the U.S. and China. But what about Beijing? Just because President Trump wants to de-escalate things now, does it mean Beijing is on board?
Yeah, so Beijing is really signaling that it's not going to yield, and it said easily threatening high tariffs is not the right way to engage with China. But it's also posturing, saying that China does not want a trade war, but it is not afraid of one. And they also urged the U.S. to preserve the hard-won progress of the negotiations that they've had. But also the Ministry of Commerce defended the new expanded export controls on rare earths that now don't just cover materials, but also equipment and processing technology, and also recycling and re-exports. And the ministry said that the new controls require licenses, but don't amount to a full export ban, and they said they're aimed at safeguarding stability, given that rare earth materials are used in the military and that there have been frequent conflicts as well. But the ministry also slammed the U.S. for a series of new measures in, quote, just the last 20 days since the Madrid trade talks, which suggests that Beijing is reacting to these moves. And the ministry listed more Chinese entities being added to the sanctions list, and also this 50% rule that's subjecting subsidiaries of sanctioned firms to the same restrictions, and also saying that thousands of firms, Chinese firms, are being affected by this. And there also mentioned the port fees that the U.S. imposed on Chinese vessels, to which Beijing has now reciprocated. And these new port fees also on U.S. vessels will be taking effect tomorrow. Now, an influential and well-connected Chinese commentator said that Beijing sees the new U.S. measures in the last month as a betrayal of the negotiation spirit from the more constructive Madrid trade talks, and also saw it as a disrespect to President Xi, who specifically urged Trump not to move ahead with more unilateral measures. And Morgan Stanley said the latest rare earth controls are also mirroring the U.S. de minimis rule on high-tech exports as well. But analysts say that Beijing is also eager to institutionalize its export controls, particularly on rare earths. So we're seeing an escalating cycle of tit-for-tat restrictions, and the temperature heating up ahead of this APEC meeting between Trump and Xi that we don't know if it's still going to take place now. Juliana.
Well, apparently everything's going to be all right, according to Truth Social. But thank you very much indeed for that, Elaine. Great coverage as ever. So the US markets on Friday took an absolute drubbing. The Mag 7, what did we lose? We lost 4.9% off Nvidia, 3.5% off Apple, 2% apiece off Microsoft and Alphabet. Tesla lost 5%. As far as the US market is concerned, as you can see, it was the Nasdaq that took the brunt of the selling. But the futures, have they stabilized? I believe they have. They are called up. Look at that.
More than stabilized.
It's a one-day event. Or is it? Steve Bryce is Global CIO at Standard Chartered and joins us now. Steve, I hope you enjoyed your very relaxing weekend.
Yes, did nothing at all over the weekend. Just had a good time, yes.
Well, that's good. That's good to know that CIOs at Standard Chartered can do that as well. Look, let's start off on what we saw on Friday. And it seems everybody's, and I've had so much commentary from my correspondents, get straight back in again. This is a great opportunity. Buy the tech decline as well. But is it as simple as that?
I don't think it is. I mean, we went into this, the end of last week, before obviously what happened over the weekend, saying, look, markets are pretty over-owned, in particular US equities. So if you look at positioning there, they're quite extreme, so around 1.75 standard deviations overweight. So, some sort of pullback at some point was likely to come. Now, it was obviously difficult to determine what the trigger would be. We're expecting strong earnings coming out. So you could say, yes, we can continue to grind higher in the short term, but Trump had other minds. So I think, yes, we do think buy the dip, but whether this is the dip to buy or whether we still have a bit more fallout, I'm not sure.
It's not much of a dip, is it? I mean, it's not comparable to what we saw in April after the previous trade concerns as well.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you'd say yesterday that Trump was going to be coming in and just reversing course almost straight away, we believe in the Trump put. Some people call it the taco trade, but we do believe that when things get really ropey, then they will reverse course and soften the stance. But I'm surprised, to be honest, he did it so quickly.
It feels like, looking at the U.S. futures this morning, we're looking at this major rebound now, that investors are, taking reassurance from Trump's comments on Truth Social that everything's going to be fine. But the reality is there are two players here. So should we be concerned about the Chinese side here? Is there a risk that, the markets become complacent again on the basis that Trump says everything's going to be okay?
I think the US, behind the bluster, is very aware that actually China has a very good hand here, right? So on rare earths, obviously the US needs those. Now, obviously the US...
Should we recap, Steve, the fact that the Chinese invested aggressively a quarter of a century ago in rare earths and the West sat there twiddling its thumbs?
Yeah, not realising how important that would be.
Who'd have thought it, that the Chinese were 25 years ahead of the West?
Well, yeah, I mean, they do have longer time horizons as well, given the political system, right? So it is a little bit different. But I think we saw obviously export data coming out of China as well, right? Up 8% year on year. So this is an exports to the US story. This is not an exports to the world story for China. So I think they have a pretty strong hand, and I think the US actually underneath this knows that. So yes, they'll threaten, they'll have bluster, but they actually want to get to the negotiating table because they probably underestimated that a while ago.
So let's talk about markets before the trade news really took everybody by storm on Friday. There have been so many concerns around whether we are in bubble territory, yet the market just continues to power higher. And just this morning, again, it looks like we're going to continue higher from here. Do you think we're in a bubble here when it comes to equity valuations?
Certainly valuations in the US are very stretched. But I mean, one of the articles we wrote actually recently was around the irrational exuberance aspect of, from 1996. And people that go, oh, irrational exuberance, that was during the bubble, that's when the market burst. Well, no, actually, after the comments in December 96, the market doubled again. So when people were concerned, so the question is, are we in 1996 or are we in 1999, 2000, right? And I think from our perspective, look, we expect fat tails, so we expect strong moves on either side, but I'm not sure that this market is done yet.
The other thing you said to us before the cameras rolled was gold. And no doubt about it, it's been a brilliant, brilliant trade and a great store of value for those who have invested in it as well. My problem with gold is not that it isn't going to be a long-term great hold. It's the fact that this has turned into a different kind of trade. Everyone talks about, the central banks are buying and the ETF flows. Well, I point out to them that those ETFs were available years ago and that the central banks have been buying for years in some fashion as well. And there is no new impetus on the central banks, that's for sure as well. So has the gold as a diversifier, as a store of value, as a safe haven, has that changed because of this rush of money in the last few months?
So, I mean, I'm certainly getting a bit concerned about gold now. I mean, we've got a 4,100 target and everybody's scrambling to upgrade their targets, right? And that's usually sign of something that gets me a little bit more worried. We're overweight gold at the moment, but probably getting a little bit edgy, with that positioning, right?
Take your profit.
So we're certainly kicking the tires on that as we speak, right? And the other thing is, when you go into a taxi, you talk to a taxi driver or an Uber, and they find out what you do. You probably get more recognised than I do. Certainly
not really.
In London,
no, get more things thrown at me than you do, probably.
So what do you think about gold? You're like, I was bullish when I walked into the taxi. I'm getting a little bit more concerned now.
There's nothing wrong with reading the Daily Mail, but unfortunately, it's not the best investment criteria.
There are, the front of the Time magazine. Everybody, we all know in history. So. Look, it is a very, very important diversification tool for investors. So that's been proven. So something in the 5 to 10% range as a portfolio hedge. I think it does still make sense. We're currently at 7% in a balanced portfolio. But yeah, I think we're starting to get a little bit, into bubble territory as far as the gold price is concerned.
What do you like as a portfolio diversifier then? I mean, speaking about your taxi example, Steve loves to also talk about how now you've got, the every regular guy on the street talking about private markets and trying to get into private markets as a diversifier here.
Yeah, so alternatives is the obvious space. I mean, the challenge, history would say that high quality government bonds is a great place to be. But in periods of higher inflation, that correlation between equities.
Sorry, I've just like an alarm went off in my head. You said high quality government bonds, and I was like, and I almost didn't ask you the question. We should have a klaxon. We should be more Kramer-like. What is a high quality government bond? Is my question.
It's probably Chinese government bonds, right? But
but seriously, what is a high quality government bond in these days where fiscally we are challenged?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not there yet in terms of the fiscal being a major concern in most markets, right? So, I mean, I know we're in the UK today and everybody's very concerned after the trust experience we had previously. I would argue France is actually in a much more tenuous situation than the UK, just from a pure fundamental perspective, but market sentiment seems to be a slightly different. But they do, we saw over the weekend, right? So US government bonds appreciated in value when stocks fell, right? But when you have high inflation, that bond equity correlation is usually more positive. So you really want to be diversifying into alternatives. But yes, everything's getting a little bit frothy. I mean, private credit, we still like private credit, but we're obviously well into that cycle. Private equity actually looks quite interesting again to us. But yes, just trying to diversify across as many different sources of return as you can.
Why do you say private equity is starting to look interesting now?
Look, I think we're starting to get the secondaries coming through as being an area that can actually lead to good value creation for investors. So obviously we had the IPO struggles and the exit plans not really coming through. But overall, we're starting to see private equity now looking more interesting.
Steve, thank you so much for the lively conversation. Way to kick off the show.
Never had too many Steves on set.
Steve Bryce.
You beg to disagree.
No. I'm very pleased to be surrounded by two wonderful Steves this morning. One more wonderful than the other. Steve Bryce, Global CIO, Standard Chartered. You couldn't see who I was looking at, I think, the audience.
She was looking at you.
Thank you for joining us. We are going to take a break. Coming up on the show, Iraq's Prime Minister tells CNBC he thinks President Trump is serious about achieving peace with the U.S. leader set to arrive in Israel. Plus, Deja Vu will bring you the latest out of France as President Macron reappoints Sebastian Lecornu to the Prime Minister slot. And we'll talk all things crypto with JP Morgan's Scott Lucas. Don't miss that conversation coming up at 7:30 London time.
It's a very fast-moving situation on the border between Gaza and Israel at the moment. We'll update you. We've got some extraordinary footage, which I'm just looking at our sister channel, Sky News, at the moment, of first aid trucks waiting at the border there. Right. Okay. U.S. President Donald Trump is set to arrive in Israel shortly, where he plans to personally greet the released hostages, according to Vice President J.D. Vance. Trump will also address Israel's parliament as a ceasefire with Hamas enters its fourth day. Speaking to reporters, Trump touted a historic visit.
This is a very special event. There had 500,000 people yesterday and today in Israel, and also the Muslim and Arab countries are all cheering. Everybody's cheering at one time. That's never happened before. Usually if you have one cheering, the other isn't. The other is the opposite. This is the first time everybody is amazed and they're thrilled, and it's an honor to be involved, and we're going to have an amazing time, and it's going to be something that's never happened before.
After his visit to Israel, Mr. Trump will head to Egypt, where he will co-host an international peace summit aimed at ending the war in Gaza and bringing a lasting peace to the region. More than 20 world leaders are expected to attend, including from the United Kingdom, Germany and France, with a signing ceremony of the Middle East peace plan between Israel and Hamas expected to take place during the summit, although neither party is expected to attend. Speaking to NBC's Meet the Press, J.D. Vance outlined the U.S.'s role in assisting the agreement's implementation amid reports of troop deployment.
We're not planning to put boots on the ground. What we already have is a U.S. Central Command. We already have people in that region of the world. They're going to monitor the terms of the ceasefire. They're going to monitor, ensure the humanitarian aid is flowing. They actually confirmed yesterday that Israel pulled back to the agreed upon lines, which of course is the first condition. The second condition, or the second term, is for the hostages to be released. So we have people in that region of the world who are going to monitor parts of this peace proposal, but the president is not planning to put boots on the ground in Israel.
Dan Murphy joins us from the region as well. Dan, I'm just looking at the headlines on our sister channel. Red Cross hands first 7 hostages to the Israeli military, and I'm looking at extraordinary pictures from Gaza as we speak. Tell us the latest on the ground and what happens next.
Well, Steve, certainly an extraordinary moment unfolding right now. Of course, the families of these hostages have been waiting for 2 years for this moment, and it has been a period of fits and starts. Of course, high hopes met with, of course, crushing lows as well. So if this hostage release is successful, it will mark what is an extraordinary turning point in this long-running war inside Gaza, not just for the Israelis, but of course for the Palestinians as well. Also, this hour, we are expecting President Donald Trump to be arriving in Israel today, kicking off what is going to be a very high-stakes tour that's going to take him to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt as well, where regional leaders have also been gathering to seal his new Gaza peace plan. The president is, of course, going to be meeting those hostage families today, as I mentioned. But inside Israel, the president is also going to be addressing the Knesset. This is the Israeli parliament, laying out what the White House has been calling an historic ceasefire roadmap, basically aimed at ending this conflict and launching a new era of regional stability. Now, Steve, Iraq has joined that long list of Arab states now backing the ceasefire, and the Prime Minister told me in an exclusive conversation that took place literally just hours ago that he thinks President Trump is serious about delivering peace and finally ending 2 years of war. Here's part of our exchange.
Iraq has declared its support for the plan announced by President Trump, and we believe he is serious about achieving peace, and this is everyone's goal. Since the events of October 7th, Iraq's position has been clear: halting this war and adopting dialogue as the basis for resolving these disputes and conflicts. The Palestinian issue is the root of the problem in the Middle East, and it is time to find solutions through dialogue and respect for international institutions and agreements. The United States initiative is important, and we hope this agreement will be a sustainable one and the beginning of a radical solution to this problem, one that will certainly guarantee the rights of the Palestinian people.
And Prime Minister, do you support this hostage release?
We support any peaceful solution that leads to an end to this war, which has caused the deaths of civilians and innocents, not only from acts of war, but also from hunger, thirst, and the lack of the most basic necessities of life. This scene is certainly painful for everyone. Iraq is the country that has suffered the most from wars, and it has also suffered from the killing of civilians and kidnapping of civilians and hostages. Iraq is certainly sensitive to all of these problems that harm the humanitarian community.
How would you characterize your own relationship with President Trump today, and what's your view on his view on Middle East diplomacy with regards to next steps for Israel and Palestine?
In general, Iraq and the United States are bound by a strategic partnership. The United States contributed to changing the dictatorial regime and also contributed to our fight against Daesh. Together, we fought this terrorist organization and defeated it, and we continue to work together to confront any actions of these terrorist groups. We have a strategic framework agreement, a comprehensive agreement, the only one Iraq has with a country like the United States. These principles will certainly be taken into consideration by any U.S. president and U.S. administration. The Trump administration, through the communications and contacts that have taken place and the exchange of messages, is emphasizing the strengthening of this relationship and opening the way to other aspects of the framework agreement. That is, the relationship should not be solely a security relationship, but rather it is important to open up to economic, technological, and cultural aspects. This is what we are working on through joint channels between the two countries.
Iraq's Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani speaking to me exclusively inside Baghdad yesterday. This was a wide-ranging conversation, and we covered a lot of ground in the hour that we spent inside the Prime Minister's compound. The Prime Minister speaking very candidly about Iraq's democracy, of course, its struggling economy as well, and his vision for Iraq's future, from fighting corruption to creating jobs for young Iraqis, diversifying the economy, which is still largely dependent on oil, and of course the foreign investment that we're now seeing coming into Iraq as well from the likes of ExxonMobil and other major US and European oil and gas companies as well, looking to essentially turn the page on what has been an economy and a nation in transition in the aftermath of the 2003 US-led invasion. So, of course, a lot of interesting lines coming out of this, but it also comes at a critical time for Iraq, which is going to the polls on November 11th, and a critical time for the region as well, which is still navigating the new US-led foreign policy agenda here, which is now essentially pushing these Arab states to become closer aligned to Israel, certainly a key foreign policy objective of the Trump administration, clearly being demonstrated and outlined today as we see the president on the ground inside Israel and hostages being released from Hamas captivity.
Dan, it was a terrific interview, and I have many, many questions for you, which I'll probably do off air at some stage, about Iraq. But I do want to ask you about what's happening in Gaza now, if I may. And look, a lot of people lauded what happened with the Abraham Accords in 2020, but said it left the Palestinian questions unanswered. And a lot of questions need answering as well. What hopes has the region got that what we're seeing now, what could come out of this Egypt conference, and then, of course, the tentative moments afterwards? What are the hopes, actually, that this can solve a lot of those unresolved issues and lead to wider peace in the Middle East?
I think I can make two key points here. The first point is there has been good Muslim and Arab support for President Donald Trump's peace plan. Of course, we've seen 2 years of catastrophic war inside Gaza. None of these leaders want to see that war continue. So there is broad support at the policy level now for this to have the green light. At the same time, the Arab street, Steve, has been growing increasingly concerned about the direction of travel on this war, and they want to see a resolution as well. So this is being viewed in the region as a very positive step. However, perhaps the hardest part is going to come next, because Hamas, of course, hasn't said it's going to lay down its arms. And at the same time as well, Israel has given no guarantee that it will stop its strikes inside Gaza as well. So it's going to take a lot of trust building. It's going to take a lot of coalition building, and it's going to take a serious plan plus serious leadership inside Gaza in order to really bring about effective change to what has been and historically divided Israel and Palestine. Whether or not there is any course of reconciliation at this point is still a big question mark. Obviously, the president's presence on the ground today is a positive step, but there is a long road ahead.